Nobody expected this. A man with no royal title, no public drama, and almost no media presence suddenly became the husband of a princess. And according to Forbes, he was already running a multi-million-dollar property business before most people even knew his name. Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi didn't arrive with loud headlines. He arrived quietly. Before the world started watching him, he lived a very different life. He built luxury homes. He moved in elite circles, and he stayed far away from cameras. That alone is unusual, because people who enter the royal family usually come with a long public history. But Edoardo, almost nothing, and that silence made people curious. Who was this man that Princess Beatrice trusted enough to marry? But here's what nobody told you. He wasn't just a businessman. He came from an old Italian aristocratic family, with roots tied to nobility and wealth that go back generations. That means he understood power. He understood status. And he understood how to stay out of the spotlight. Now think about this for a second. You have a princess born into one of the most watched families in the world. And she chooses a man who built his life avoiding that exact spotlight. Why? Was it love? Or was there something deeper that made him the perfect fit? And here's where it gets even more interesting. People close to the royal circle told People magazine that Beatrice had been through years of personal struggles before meeting him, feeling overlooked, constantly compared, and searching for stability. Edoardo came in at exactly the right time. Calm, controlled, private, almost too perfect. So here's the question no one can ignore. Did he just happen to be the right man at the right time? Or did he know exactly what he was stepping into from the very beginning? Because what happens next starts to raise even more questions. And it all begins with a past he couldn't leave behind. Before the royal wedding, before the headlines, there was someone else. Edoardo was in a serious relationship for years with an architect named Edoardo. They weren't just dating, they built a life together. And in 2016, they had a son. That changes everything. Because this wasn't a short romance. This was a family. But here's where it gets complicated. Reports say Edoardo and Dara split in 2018. And just months later, he was already being seen with Princess Beatrice. That timeline made people uncomfortable. It felt fast. And this is where it gets dark. Some insiders quietly questioned how clean that transition really was. Was the relationship truly over? Or did something overlap behind the scenes? No one confirmed it publicly, but the whispers never stopped. According to multiple reports at the time, Dara herself hinted that the breakup was sudden, unexpected. Imagine that for a second. You have a child with someone. You build years together. And then suddenly, they move on into the royal family. That's not just a breakup. That's a complete life shift. But here's what most people missed. Edoardo didn't walk away from responsibility. He stayed involved in his son's life. Photos later showed a blended situation. Public appearances where everything looked calm, civil, almost perfect, but appearances can be controlled. And people started asking a deeper question. How does someone move from one life to another that quickly? Psychologists often say that fast transitions like this can signal emotional overlap or unresolved ties. A 2021 relationship study even found that quick rebounds often hide deeper emotional complexity beneath the surface. And that makes this story harder to ignore. Because from the outside, it looked like a clean, smooth shift. But underneath, it may have been anything but simple. Now here's something you need to decide for yourself. Do you think this was just bad timing? Or does it suggest something more complicated about who Edoardo really is? Most people pick a side on this. Which side are you on? Tell us in the comments. Because what happens next doesn't clear things up. It actually makes everything feel even more rushed. A relationship that moved so fast. It shocked even the royal family. And once you see how quickly things escalated, you start to understand why some people never fully trusted this story from the beginning. It moved fast, too fast for comfort. By late 2018, Edoardo and Princess Beatrice were already being seen together in public. Private dinners turned into royal appearances almost overnight. And within less than a year, they were engaged. That kind of speed doesn't happen often in the royal world. These relationships usually take years to build, tested under pressure, watched from every angle. But this one, it skipped steps. And this is where it gets interesting. According to BBC News, the couple announced their engagement in September 2019. Soon after, plans for a grand royal wedding were already underway. Everything looked like a fairy tale, but not everyone believed it, because behind the scenes, there were quiet concerns. Some royal watchers questioned whether Beatrice truly had enough time to understand the man she was marrying. Think about that. You're stepping into one of the most scrutinized families on earth. Every decision matters. Every relationship becomes history. And yet, this one moved like a sprint. But here's what nobody told you. The timing wasn't just fast. It was strategic. Edoardo already knew high society. He understood how to navigate wealth, influence, and powerful families. That made him different. He didn't need to adjust. He fit right in. And that's exactly what made some people uneasy. Because when someone fits in too easily, it raises a question. Are they adapting? Or were they always preparing for something like this? Then 2020 changed everything. The global pandemic forced them to cancel their large royal wedding. Instead, they held a small, private ceremony in July 2020. No massive crowds. No global spectacle. Just a quiet wedding at Windsor. To some people, it felt intimate, genuine. But to others, it felt convenient. Less attention. Less scrutiny, fewer questions. Wait, it gets worse. Because while the world focused on the romance, very few noticed the pressure building behind closed doors. Marrying into the royal family doesn't just change your life. It tests it. A 2020 report by The Guardian noted that royal spouses often face intense psychological pressure, constant media judgment, and identity loss. And Edoardo walked straight into that storm. But here's the real twist. Unlike others, he didn't seem overwhelmed. He stayed calm, composed, almost untouched. And that calm raised even more questions. Because when everything around you changes overnight, and you show no cracks at all, what does that really say about you? This next part of the story, very few people know about it. Subscribe right now, so you never miss stories the mainstream media buries. Because what happens behind closed doors after the wedding is where the real story begins. From the outside, everything looked flawless. A princess, a wealthy husband, a quiet, stable life. But real life doesn't work like that. After the wedding in 2020, Edoardo stepped fully into royal life. Public duties, family expectations, constant attention. And yet, he barely changed. He still ran his property company, Bonda. He still kept a low profile, even while standing next to royalty. That balance impressed people, but also confused them, because most outsiders struggle when they enter the royal system. They crack under pressure. They make mistakes. Edoardo didn't. And this is where it gets dark. Some royal insiders noted how carefully controlled everything around him felt. His appearances, his words, even his expressions. Nothing slipped. According to behavioral experts cited by The Telegraph, people who maintain extreme composure under pressure often rely on deep emotional control or careful image management. Now ask yourself this. Is that strength, or is it strategy? Because behind that calm image, real pressure was building. Princess Beatrice wasn't just a wife. She was now a stepmother too. Blending families is never easy, especially when the world is watching every move. And yet, publicly, everything looked smooth. Too smooth. Photos showed happy moments, perfect smiles, a united family. But here's what nobody told you. Royal life doesn't allow cracks to show. Everything gets managed. And when everything is managed, you stop seeing what's real. A 2021 study in Journal of Family Psychology found that blended families often face hidden stress, even when they appear stable from the outside. That matters here, because what we see may not be the full story. And this next part changes everything. Small moments start to slip through. Tiny details people usually ignore. But once you notice them, you can't unsee them. Have you ever trusted someone completely and later questioned everything? That quiet doubt that creeps in slowly? That's exactly the kind of feeling some royal watchers began to describe. It all comes down to patterns. Patterns in behavior. Patterns in timing. Patterns in silence. Because the truth isn't always in what people say. Sometimes it's in what they carefully avoid. So the real question is this: what exactly were people starting to notice? And why did those small details make the entire story feel different? At first, it was nothing obvious, just small details, easy to miss. But once people started looking closer, they couldn't stop. Edoardo and Beatrice rarely spoke about their private life. And in royal terms, silence always makes people curious. Because when everything is perfect, people talk about it. And when everything is too private, they talk even more. Wait, it gets worse. Observers noticed that Edoardo almost never gave interviews. Even when Beatrice appeared in public events, he often stayed in the background. Not absent, just positioned away from attention. That might seem normal for a private person, but in royal circles, even small patterns matter. According to Vanity Fair, royal spouses are usually expected to slowly step into public-facing roles over time. Edoardo did not follow that pattern in a typical way, and that made people ask questions. Why stay so distant when you're married into one of the most visible families in the world? Then came another detail. His business life stayed separate, very separate. Bonda, his property development company, continued operating in elite London circles. Luxury homes, high-value clients, private deals, and that separation raised eyebrows. Because in royal marriages, worlds usually blend over time. But in this case, the lines stayed very clear. Two lives, not one. And here's where things start to feel strange. Some royal commentators pointed out that Edoardo's public image never shifted dramatically, even after marriage. No sudden personality change, no major media exposure, no emotional breakdowns under pressure. Almost like he had already built a life that didn't need to change. And that brings us to a deeper psychological point. Experts in Forbes' human behavior reports have noted that individuals who maintain strict control over their public image often do so to protect something private: identity, business, or emotional boundaries. So what exactly was being protected here? Because every layer you peel back leads to the same feeling. Control. Not chaos. Not confusion. Control. But control always comes with a question. What are you controlling, and why? And this is the part people keep circling back to. A calm man. A fast-moving relationship. A quiet entry into royalty. And a life that stayed carefully divided. Piece by piece, it builds a pattern. And patterns don't lie. Or at least, they don't lie easily. Now, the final question starts to form. Is this story about a man who simply values privacy? Or someone who understood exactly how to navigate one of the most powerful families in the world without ever losing control? Because the final piece of this puzzle changes everything you think you understand. And it all leads into what happens next when the pressure of royal life stops being invisible. By now, the picture feels different. Not darker, just more complicated. Princess Beatrice didn't just marry a businessman. She married into a carefully balanced life of privacy, power, and constant public pressure. And Edoardo fits into that world in a way that still makes people pause. Because nothing about his life is loud. Everything is controlled, measured, quiet. But royal life doesn't stay quiet forever. As the years move forward, expectations grow. More public duties, more visibility, more scrutiny. And that's where the real test begins. Not the wedding, not the headlines, but the long, daily reality of being inside the royal system. According to the Times, many modern royal spouses face a hidden challenge: balancing personal identity with public duty. Over time, that pressure can either strengthen relationships or slowly reshape them. And that's the question sitting at the center of this story. What happens when a private man is placed inside a public world that never stops watching? Because Edoardo hasn't changed much publicly, but the world around him has. And Beatrice stands right in the middle of it. Family, duty, privacy, expectations, all pulling in different directions. Wait, it gets worse. The royal family is not just a household. It's an institution built on image, stability, and control. And every member inside, it eventually faces the same reality. Nothing stays hidden forever. So even if everything looks calm today, history shows us something important. Pressure always finds a way out. one way or another. And that brings us to the final question. Is this marriage the beginning of a stable, quiet, royal future? Or just the calm before a much bigger story unfolds? Because one thing is clear. We still haven't seen the full truth of how this couple will evolve under pressure that never stops growing. And there's still one chapter people rarely talk about, the one involving how the royal system itself changes the people inside it. That story is next. But here's what we didn't cover today. And trust me, it's worse. Watch the next video right now. The link is on your screen.